these people that come here to tear this country
Mr. Secretary.
apart
Let me reclaim my time because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says, and that means that you are trumping the legal Supreme Court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has the right to a student visa.
Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country apart.
Secretary Rubio, I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs. Apparently you're the
Marco Rubio just got called out for something shocking, revoking a student's visa simply because she wrote an op-ed. Yes, you heard that right, an opinion piece. And when pressed by Representative Pramila Jayapal, Rubio tried to dodge responsibility, only to be dragged right back into the hot seat. What followed wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a fundamental fight over free speech, the Constitution, and whether government power is being abused to silence dissent.
Representative Jayapal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. On March 21st, 2025, the State Department approved the revocation of a student visa for Rümeysa Öztürk, a Turkish citizen who is a graduate student at Tufts University, apparently simply for writing an op-ed. According to an internal State Department memo, you took this action under your discretionary authority to revoke visas, and soon after you revoked her visa, armed and masked plainclothes officers snatched Ms. Öztürk off the street and transported her to a prison in Louisiana. Mr. Secretary, do you really think that Ms. Öztürk's op-ed results in a foreign policy consequence for the United States?
I believe that case involves someone whose visa we never would have granted had we known ahead of time.
I'm not asking you that question. I'm asking you if you think an op-ed, but that's exactly, in fact, what happened. The State Department wrote a memo concluding that you did not have sufficient grounds to revoke Ms. Öztürk's visa. There was no evidence showing that she'd engaged in any activities were a threat to national security. And in fact, in May, a federal court ordered Ms. Öztürk's release from detention, noting that the sole basis for the government's detention appeared to be the fact that she co-authored this opinion piece in the Tufts newspaper in March of 2024. Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
So, but is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you, while I have the authority, I will continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country apart.
Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says, and that means that you are trumping the legal Supreme Court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has the right to a student visa.
Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country apart.
I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job who snatches her off the street.
We don't do the snatching, but I can tell you we do the visa revocations.
Let me ask you about the national security consequences of people, masked men on the streets, snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So you think that U.S. agents who have almost always gone without face coverings, even when they're arresting some of the country's most dangerous criminals, suddenly have so much to fear from a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that they need to be masked?
Again,
is that
that law
accurate?
student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you
we deny
revoked her
visas every
student
day,
visa
and we will revoke and
based
continue
on
to
an
revoke
op-ed,
visas.
which trumps the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't
They're
do any of
guests.
that. She wrote an op-ed.
Well,
she
that's
wrote
what
an
you
op-ed,
claim.
and I'm talking to you about her
That's her
particular
lawyer's
case.
claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
You reclaiming my time. You revoked her student visa
Yes,
because
proudly.
she wrote an op-ed.
And we'll do more. We're gonna do more of
I
them.
have another question for you. Would you revoke the visa of someone in the United States who published claims that, quote, Jews are an untrustworthy and dangerous group? Yes or no?
We will revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest who's here to
Are you
stir up
going to
trouble.
revoke the visa of somebody who made
Send me
that?
the case, I'll look at it.
that
I'm looking
statement?
to get crazy people out of our
Actually, it's not
country.
just about revoking.
Forward
You
to
actually,
revoking the visas
Secretary
of any
Rubio,
lunatics you
excuse
can
me,
identify.
reclaiming my time. Can you explain to me why the Trump administration granted refugee status to Charles Kleinhaus, the white Afrikaner who tweeted that exact statement that I just said? There's the case.
That's not a visa.
You granted that person
That's
to
a
enter
totally
the United
different process.
States.
That's someone that applied here through a totally different process.
Secretary Rubio,
student visas are a privilege.
Secretary
we deny
Rubio,
them all the time, and we'll revoke them.
You revoked
And
a visa based on an op-ed, and then you allowed for
Gentlelady's time has
masked men
expired.
to
That's your
snatch
claim. That's
somebody off
accurate. That's
the
your claim.
street.
Your time's
That's your claim.
expired.
That's your claim. That's not accurate.
Recognize ranking.
This exchange between Representative Pramila Jayapal and Secretary Marco Rubio isn't just a heated back and forth in a congressional hearing. It's a moment that forces us to ask some of the hardest questions about what it really means to live in a democracy. At the surface, this clash is about a student visa. A Turkish graduate student studying in the United States writes an op-ed, not a bomb threat, not a call to violence, not espionage, just an opinion piece. And because of that, Secretary Rubio exercises his authority to revoke her visa. Not long after, masked and armed agents take her off the street, detain her, and strip her of the freedom she thought America promised her. But look closer. This isn't really about one student. It's about whether the principles we say we believe in as a country actually mean anything when they're put to the test. Jayapal's questions cut to the heart of this issue. Where in the Constitution does it say that a Secretary of State gets to determine what counts as acceptable speech? Where does it say that an op-ed is grounds for stripping someone of their rights and treating them like a criminal? Rubio's defense is that visas are a privilege, not a right, and in a technical sense, that's true. But that technicality masks a much more dangerous precedent. If a student can have their visa revoked for an opinion piece, then the message is clear. Dissent, especially dissent that makes those in power uncomfortable, can be punished. That's not national security. That's censorship. That's using the machinery of government to silence voices, not because they're dangerous, but because they're inconvenient. And think about the symbolism of it all. Masked men, armed agents, a young graduate student taken off the street as if she were a threat to national security. Jayapal rightly points out that this isn't how American law enforcement typically operates. Even the most dangerous criminals are often arrested openly, without disguise. So why the masks here? If this was just a lawful enforcement action, why the secrecy? Why the theater of intimidation? It raises unsettling questions. Was this about enforcing the law, or was it about sending a message? The deeper danger here is how quickly small erosions of freedom become normalized. Rights rarely disappear all at once. They slip away one decision at a time, one justification at a time, always in the name of security or order. Today, it's a foreign graduate student writing an op-ed. Tomorrow, it could be a journalist. After that, an activist. And one day, perhaps even citizens themselves. That's how democracies weaken, not by loud announcements, but by silent, incremental compromises. What Jayapal did in this moment was not just defend one student. She was drawing a line around the very idea of free speech in America. She was reminding us that the Constitution doesn't belong to cabinet secretaries or political parties. It belongs to the people. And when government officials start to carve out exceptions for themselves, when they start saying this speech counts and that speech doesn't, that's when democracy is in real danger. And here's what makes it even more telling. When pressed with hard questions, Rubio's answers leaned on technicalities, on statutes, on process. But Jayapal kept bringing it back to principle, to the Constitution, to the Supreme Court, to the higher law that's supposed to bind everyone, no matter their position. That contrast tells you everything. One side is about authority and power. The other side is about rights and accountability. This moment matters because it reminds us that democracy isn't self-sustaining. It has to be defended again and again, especially in the small, quiet cases that don't make the front page of the news, because those are the cases that set the precedent for what comes next. So ask yourself, do you believe that America is stronger when we silence voices we don't agree with, or when we uphold the principle that even unpopular speech deserves protection? Because at the end of the day, the way we treat the least powerful among us, the foreign student, the immigrant, the outsider, reveals how much we truly value the freedoms we claim to stand for. And that's why this exchange between Jayapal and Rubio matters so deeply. It's not just about her reclaiming her time in a hearing. It's about reclaiming the meaning of freedom itself. If you care about these kinds of critical debates, moments where democracy is tested in real time, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're going to keep breaking down these clashes, asking the hard questions, and holding power accountable.